Hi, welcome to Deepening Faith, a new UCB podcast, all about life as a teenage Christian. I'm Amy, and I'm going to be joined by my friend Eliora.
Being a teenage Christian can be quite hard at times, and we found that neither of us know many Christians our age outside of our inner circles, and we want to find out more about other people's experiences trying to live through this stage of life whilst following Jesus.
Over the next few weeks and episodes, we're going to be chatting with some interesting and fun people who have done this and might be able to help us answer some questions we have and questions we're just not sure about.
Throughout this series, we'd love to hear your experiences of following Jesus as a teenager. Maybe you don't know many other Christians your age, or maybe you do. Tell us the good and the bad about trying to follow Jesus whilst going through these years of our lives. You can contact us on our email, deepeningfaith@ucb.co.uk.
Today, we're going to be joined by Grace, who recently finished sixth form and is a mutual friend of ours.
We caught up with her about how she found talking about her faith whilst at school.
Right before I started secondary school, I remember I had a conversation with an older girl who goes to our church, and she sat me down and she said, it's best to just say straight away that you are a Christian, because if you don't say, then it just becomes this awkward thing that comes up later on at some weird opportunity. Like if they come to your house and then suddenly like there's crosses all over your house, or like this is coming from a Christian family, obviously. Or like you say grace before dinner, and it's just, it's easier to say it straight away than kind of leave it lingering. So I always made sure, like I went in, and in primary school, I'd kind of been very open about it, because obviously growing up in a Christian home is different for different people. Some people don't connect with God at all, even though they have a Christian family. Some people have a more of an up and down journey. Mine in primary school was very much, I never really doubted my beliefs. And in secondary school, I went in confident of what I believed, but trying to have that humility of I didn't want to be, because some people, as soon as you say you're a Christian, some people have certain questions.
Stereotypes.
Yeah, they have certain ideas about you before you even say something. So, for example, when I understand why people have this opinion, people might be cautious to come up to you if they're LGBT, if you're Christian, because of how Christians respond loudly in the media. And I'm not saying that is a Christian or non-Christian response, but generally people assume that Christians aren't going to be very nice about stuff like that. And you can understand why. So I was cautious of being an antagonizing person. I didn't want to start arguments or like debates in the middle of lesson. But if someone were to ask me about it, I wanted to come across as someone who was open to questions without it seeming like an attack on my faith, or I was attacking them for not having a faith or having a different faith. So it was all right for me. I think I was quite blessed in that regard, that I didn't really face much conflict or challenging of my beliefs from people who I wasn't good friends with. Like if I was good friends with someone, they'd ask me questions, and sometimes I wouldn't have the answer, but I'd still feel fine about it, I don't know if you guys have had different experiences, but I thought mine was quite good.
I had quite a different experience in primary school. So I was often bullied a lot, and even teachers would say things like, oh, you should be able to sit still on a pew because you go to church, and we don't have pews in our church. And it was comments like that, and there were some bigger incidences, and that really damaged my ability to be outspoken with my faith. So in school, our lessons, I have had some panic attacks when asked to share my opinions on some stuff. But what are your experience with school RE lessons, and how did you find voicing your opinions on things that that you might have a different opinion than other people?
In RE, I didn't do it past year 9, so I've only done it for as long as you guys have done it. And I don't know, I think being the only Christian in my year in primary school prepared me kind of for secondary school, where I was again the only Christian in my year, about one person who came on in later years, but in my lessons I was definitely the only Christian. And so when we talked about Christianity, sometimes I'd say, you know, they'd be talking about prisons, or they'd be talking about, I don't know, contraception or gay marriage, and it'd be like, Christians believe, and I'd be sat there thinking, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
You know, like, as the sole Christian representative in this room, I'm not really sure what that's about. And sometimes I'd say things, and because I was a massive people pleaser, so I'd never wanted to get anyone on my bad side. Oh, I mean, I didn't want to be on anyone's bad side. So if I did speak, no one would really take the mick, luckily. Like, I felt really, really thankful for that, because I tried to do it in a way that was, you know, humble and didn't step on any toes. Like, in terms of, you know, like a quite controversial topic, even within Christian circles, is sexuality. And because I don't know why this is, I think it's because I remember my first friend in year 7, like, we had conversations about sexuality even, you know, then, and they, you know, said, oh, I don't think I'm straight. And I was just like, you know, whatever. And I'd dealt with that from when I was like 11. So by the time I got to like talking about it in RE lessons, I'd kind of already dealt with my opinions on that subject. And I'd kind of thought, you know what, some people in Christian circles don't think this is okay. Some people do, you know, and a lot of people think that Christians don't think this is okay, but I think the primary message needs to be love. So whenever I tried to, you know, or if some people said to me, but aren't all Christians homophobic or whatever, I'd just be like, well, all Christians are taught to love. So if they're not doing that primarily, then they're failing at what they believe, basically. So I don't know, I didn't really speak up that much because, to be fair, the RE lessons were a bit rubbish. I don't know if you've had that, but RE lessons just, you don't really talk about it. I feel like I learned nothing in them. I mean, as a Christian, maybe that's why, but I feel like I learned more about people's misconceptions about Christianity than I learned about any other religion.
Yeah, it definitely felt like in our RE lessons, we had to stand on one side if we believed one thing and stand on the other if we believed the other. And it always felt like
Yeah, there was no nuance.
Yeah, it was always like, I was always like one of the only people stood on the one side that I believe a certain thing.
Yes, same.
And it was always very, almost like overwhelming.
I remember the friend who I spoke about. So we'd be walking to school one day. I remember this very vividly. I think I was about in year 8, and they just asked me questions, not in an interrogating way. They weren't trying to start an argument. They were just curious, but I think they were in a bad mood. So they were asking it in quite like, how can you believe this? I don't understand this.
That's aggressive.
Yeah. And I was like, I was really trying not to cry because I knew what I believed, but I hadn't really thought about it in that way, or I didn't know how to articulate it properly, and I couldn't answer it like right there on the spot. So I was just sat there like walking to school, like trying not to stress, because I don't know about you, but in arguments, I often like get very emotional, and I try not to show it because it's embarrassing, but if I don't know what to say, I just get really panicky. I think a bit like you said, Eliora. So, I mean, I'm glad that I didn't have that pressure with 30 people in a room staring at me, but I've had it in one-to-one conversations, so I can kind of get what you mean.
It's always a difficult, like, the questions that you never really questioned yourself, and then they're suddenly being battered straight at you. Like, why does suffering exist? Or, like, all these things that you don't really, you just don't know.
Literally today, I was reading a book about, it's about how our world today has been shaped by Christianity. It's not explicitly non-Christian or a Christian view, it's just kind of a history. And it mentions that in Egyptian history, which I'm going to need to look more into this because this is only one historian's work, but they said that in Egyptian history, there is no mention of Moses or the plagues or the Red Sea. And I remember reading that and thinking, oh my gosh, like I've always just taken that to be true and factual. But then obviously there's people out there who are going to, read through it and be like, well, there's this and this and this. And you just kind of, it's growing up and learning that it's not just as simple as you thought it was as a child.
Yeah.
I guess.
How do you answer like those sort of answer me this questions like why do we suffer and stuff like that? How do you answer those?
Well, I kind of always say, I always premise my answer with, I don't really know everything. I'm still learning just as much as you are. And I always go into those answers thinking, well, if this person has asked me this question, it means they're thinking about it too, And usually if it's coming from a friend, you'd hope that they're thinking about it and not trying to start an argument. And I just kind of go into it with what I know to be true, because obviously there's so much, I'm sure you guys know what I mean, that you kind of have doubts about in Christianity, not like the main stuff, but all the stuff in between that the difficult questions come from. And I kind of always try to just think, I know that Jesus is a good man, and I know that he's the Son of God, and I know that he loved me and created me. And I kind of, with suffering, for example, I think, you know what, I don't think God puts bad things on the earth for us to deal with. I don't think he, is making an obstacle course for us. I don't think that's how it works. And, people would then say, oh, but look at the Old Testament, look at Job. And then that's something else I struggle with, because I'm like, the Old Testament God is the same as the New Testament God, but sometimes they feel so different. And you just kind of got to think, well, he loves us, and only good things come from God. So why would he put things in place for us? I don't know. It's hard, and I've still not really got all the answers, but I'm sure you guys understand that there is certain things that you know to be true, and then you've just got to kind of lead with that. So I think some people often see Christians as kind of believing contradictory statements or having contradictory beliefs, which you can understand if you see the very outspoken people, for example, and some of the stuff they say. But I don't know, I think you've always got to go with humility and say, I don't have all the answers. I'm never going to have all the answers, and I'm still thinking about it too.
So how do you discuss faith with friends of a different religion, like for your Muslim friends and things?
So I think a lot of my life, my best friends, for example, like all three of my best friends, like throughout my life, have been Muslim girls. And so that's been quite helpful in discussing religion, because I think Islam and Christianity, obviously both are Abrahamic religions, are both spout kind of from Judaism. So we have a lot of similar things and then a lot of differences. And I always you kind of have to go into these conversations with people that you trust and that you know, and that they trust you, and you aren't trying to have an argument here. You're just trying to talk and see where you have similarities. I think that's a good thing to lead with, and say, oh, we both value love, or we both value peace, and we both value forgiveness. But then also differences. So like in the Quran, for example, it mentions about modesty, like modest dress for women. And in the Bible, it has similar things. So you can talk about that and then talk about how that's different in practice. But yeah, I think you always have to go into those conversations with kind of, again, humility and kind of just openness. Like, be willing to listen and agree that, oh, we may not agree on this, but we've both heard each other out, and it's not like ended in World War. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, one of my friends is a Christadelphian, and I always find it very interesting talking to her about how like they don't believe in the Holy Spirit. And yeah, it's always much more interesting and insightful than you first think it will be.
Yeah, I agree. I think because obviously there's a lot of similarities, you can kind of, I don't know, get different perspectives, and that can kind of help you with your faith. I don't know, like my friend who's a Muslim, she was talking to me about why she chooses to wear a hijab, but she believes that not every Muslim woman has to. Whereas I know there's some people in that faith who hold the belief that every woman has to, or that everyone should, or that no one should, and it can be quite divisive in that religion, similar to, there's different things in Christianity that can be quite divisive. But yeah, like she was explaining to me why she chooses to wear it, but that she understands why other people don't. And that was really interesting, because I think a lot of the time, especially because of, Islamophobic culture in the West, hijabs are kind of demonized, and people who wear them are seen as, that's oppression or whatever, but it's not always. Like, it can be your choice to do that. And I think it was helpful to talk to her and like kind of recognize that, because even though I might not have always thought consciously that, it's kind of implied by the media in this country and by the representation of Muslim people in the media. It's all this horrible. It's like, imagine if people viewed Christianity based on the KKK, like, who claim to be Christians, but that doesn't represent the beliefs of most Christians in the world at all. But I think that happens in Islam, and it's really, really sad that it does. But I think if you talk and stuff, you can realise that things aren't that different. I think it's also important to talk to Catholics too, none of us here are Catholic, but they're Christians, and just because they practice differently doesn't mean they're not Christians.
Did you have any Christian unions or things at your school? And do you think your school did well in supporting people with faith? Or what do you think they could have done better at?
School itself didn't, but there was people from my church who started stuff in school before I got there. So when I was in year 7, I entered in, there was already this small but lovely group of people who had the same beliefs that I did, and we chatted about it, and they brought their friends. And though I never brought my friends, I kind of always told my friends what I was doing. I was trying to make it very clear that, well, you can always come to this if you want to. But school didn't really do much to facilitate that. I think also my RE teachers, like Eliora said about the person who said that about the pews, they can be really kind of, I don't know, brush it aside. I remember my brother, who doesn't have like a super strong faith anyways, he's kind of not really bothered about it, but he said to me that in his RE lesson this year, so bear in mind this is a class of year 11 students, his teacher was dismissing the idea of miracles and basically saying that it was like rubbish. And I was thinking, as an RE teacher, you're meant to be impartial. You're not meant to give your opinion on anything really, because this is obviously very delicate. And my brother came home and he was like, I'm so annoyed. I was like, why did he do that? It's so, I don't know, it just made no sense.
And that's quite toxic. And I think it can feed some of the bullying in schools around people with faith, which I don't think is helpful at all. I think that needs to change.
Thank you so much to Grace for joining us today. We really appreciated talking to her. I thought it was really interesting how she said, and a really great point actually, to just be outright with your faith so it doesn't become such a big deal down the line.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because it's quite awkward if you get into a friendship for months, maybe even years, without them knowing that you are a Christian. And then if somebody else brings it up, or it comes out in conversation, and then wait, what, you're a Christian? And then it's a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just outright with it from the first. It's a lot easier and more natural to them, have conversations, and it won't be a big thing.
Yeah.
Can be quite hard. And yeah, that is totally something that I would implement into my own school life.
I thought it was really useful how she also said about how when people, especially in RA, to ask you questions, being well, there's a lot of range of views within Christianity, but the main view is to be loving and to love.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. Yeah, there is a diversity of opinions amongst Christians.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. Keep an eye on the UCB Player app or wherever you get your podcasts for the next episode. See ya!